Deputies stripped the linens. Plywood sheets were clamped to the box spring. The modification was structural. Sleep was not the primary function of that bed. On August 12, 1958, a long-haul trucker discovered a female subject walking along the shoulder of U.S. Highway 93, 20 miles south of Wells, Nevada. She was barefoot. She wore a stained yellow dress that did not fit her frame. She carried no identification, no purse, and no water. She was walking north into the desert, away from the nearest town. The trucker flagged down a patrol car. Sheriff Osborne arrived at the scene at 4 p.m. He identified the subject as Alice Miller, a 24-year-old secretary reported missing from Twin Falls, Idaho, 3 weeks prior. Miller was dehydrated and suffering from second-degree sunburn. She did not respond to Osborne's questions. She did not speak. She simply stared at the heat rising off the asphalt. Paramedics transported Miller to the county hospital in Elko. Dr. Nolan conducted the intake examination. He noted ligature marks on her wrists and ankles, healed to the point of scarring. Her fingernails were trimmed to the quick. Her hair had been cut unevenly with shears. But the primary anomaly was located on the left side of her head. Her left ear was missing. The removal was not traumatic. It was surgical. The skin had been cauterized and healed smooth against the skull, leaving only the auditory canal exposed. There was no infection. The scar tissue was flat, precise, and white. It looked less like a wound and more like an erasure. Dr. Nolan noted the procedure was at least 2 weeks old. Sheriff Osborne inventoried Miller's possessions. She had nothing in her pockets except a single brass key on a plastic diamond-shaped fob. The fob was stamped with faded gold lettering. The Dusty Wheel. Room 7. The plastic was cracked. The key was heavy. It was the only lead they had. The Dusty Wheel Motor Court sat at mile marker 82. It was a 12-unit structure built in 1948, catering to transients and overflow traffic from the highway. Osborne arrived at 6:30 p.m. The neon sign buzzed in the twilight. The parking lot was gravel. It was empty. There were no vehicles in front of the units. The silence was absolute. The office door was unlocked. A bell chimed when Osborne entered. The front desk was dusty. A half-finished cup of coffee sat near the register. The liquid evaporated to a black sludge. A lit cigarette had burned itself out in the ashtray, leaving a long cylinder of gray ash. The owner, a man identified in county records as Clarence Cole, was not present. Osborne moved to the registration desk. He checked the guest check-in sheets. The last entry was dated August 1st. It was a single name, Smith. License plate, illegible. Room 7, the key found on Alice Miller, was listed as vacant for the entire month of July. The records were incomplete. Pages had been torn out. Deputies arrived to sweep the grounds. They unlocked room 7. The bed was made tight, military corners. The air smelled of bleach and stale tobacco. There was no luggage, no personal items. But when Deputy Kemp moved the nightstand, he found scratch marks on the linoleum. Deep grooves, as if the heavy furniture had been dragged repeatedly. They stripped the bed. Between the mattress and the box spring, they found 2 sheets of plywood. They were clamped together with C-clamps. Osborne unscrewed the clamps. The wood separated with a sticky sound. Between the boards lay a single strand of blonde hair, pressed flat into the grain. It matched Alice Miller's color. The search moved to the owner's quarters behind the office. It was a single room. A cot, a hot plate, a radio gutted of its tubes. The closet contained 6 identical gray suits, hung 2 inches apart. On the floor of the closet, pushed to the back, was a wooden crate stamped with a peach brand. It was nailed shut. Osborne pried the lid. Inside was a heavy iron book press, the kind used for binding encyclopedias. The screw mechanism was greased. The platens were stained with a dark, resinous substance. Next to the press was a stack of wax paper sheets, a box of straight pins, and a cigar box. The cigar box was heavy. Osborne placed it on the desk. He opened the lid. There were no cigars. Inside, filed vertically like index cards, were wax paper squares. Each one was folded over something thin. There were 7 packets in total. Osborne lifted the first one. It felt brittle. He unfolded the wax paper. Pressed between the sheets, dried flat and translucent as a pressed flower, was a human left ear. It was paper thin. The cartilage had been crushed, the moisture removed. It was preserved perfectly. Taped to the bottom of the wax paper was a strip of masking tape with a handwritten code. The code read, NV84211, a license plate number. Osborne checked the next packet. Another left ear, pressed flat, yellowed with age. The label, UT33905. The third, CAK992. 7 packets, 7 left ears, 7 license plates from 4 different states. The 7th packet was fresh. The wax paper was still tacky. The ear was smaller. The label read, ID 22199. Osborne radioed the station to run the plate. It belonged to a 1954 Ford sedan registered to Alice Miller. The trophy had been harvested, processed, and filed before she escaped. Investigators focused on the impress in the closet. The resinous stain was tested. It was a mixture of pine sap and human biological fluids. The press was the mechanism. The subject would be restrained, the cartilage removed, placed between wax paper, and compressed under high tension until it dried flat. A collection of listeners who could no longer hear. They ran the other 6 license plates. The results came back over the teletype at 2 a.m. Utah, Arthur Nash, missing 1955. California, Thomas Reed, missing 1956. Nevada, William Boyd, missing 1957. All single male travelers, all last seen on Highway 93, all presumed to have drifted on. The timeline established a pattern. 1 guest per year. Always in late summer, always a traveler alone. Cole didn't take families. He didn't take pairs. He waited for the solos. The ones who paid cash. The ones whose disappearance would be blamed on the road itself. Deputies searched the grounds for remains. They brought in canine units. The dogs alerted on a patch of disturbed earth behind the incinerator. They dug 4 feet down. They found nothing but ash and bone fragments, too small to identify. The disposal method had been thorough. At the hospital, Alice Miller remained mute. She would not hold a pen. She would not look at photographs of Cole. She sat in a wheelchair by the window, turning her head so her good ear faced the wall. Dr. Nolan noted that she flinched at the sound of the door latch. The search for Cole expanded. Roadblocks were set up at the state line. His description was circulated. White male, 50s, thinning hair, heavy build. But the description came from a 1953 business license. No recent photograph existed. He was a ghost who ran a motel. Back at the Dusty Wheel, Osborne found the final piece of evidence. He removed a calendar from the wall above the radio. Behind it, tacked directly to the plaster, was a folding road map of the United States. It was worn at the folds. There were pins in the map, red sewing pins, 7 of them, 1 in Wells, Nevada, 1 in Provo, Utah, 1 in Barstow, California. They marked the home addresses of the license plates found in the cigar box. 7 victims, 7 trophies, 7 pins. But the pins were not the only marks. Osborne shined his flashlight closer. Scattered across the map, following the interstate veins of America, were small pencil circles. They were faint, erasable. There were dozens of them. Osborne counted. 41 pencil circles. 41 locations where no pin had been placed yet. They spanned from Oregon to New Mexico. They weren't past locations. They were future inventory. The 7 ears in the box were just the beginning of the collection. The circles followed a specific route, a loop, a circuit that a man could drive in a season. Cole wasn't just a motel operator. He was a hunter who had built a blind and waited for the game to come to him. When the game ran out, he planned to move. The motel was a trap. The guest book was a lie. The real registry was the cigar box. And Cole was gone? His car, a 1951 Chevrolet truck, was missing. He had taken his tools. He had taken his money. He had left the collection behind because it was heavy, or perhaps because he was done with it. Forensic analysis of the office revealed dust outlines on the shelves where other boxes might have sat. The 7 ears might have been the current volume. The pencil circles suggested a backlog of intent, or perhaps other boxes hidden elsewhere, in other rooms, in other states. The investigation stalled. Sightings of Cole were reported in Arizona, in Texas, in Montana. None were confirmed. The Dusty Wheel sat empty for 3 years. The wind stripped the shingles. The neon sign broke. In 1961, the property was condemned. A demolition crew arrived to clear the site. When they knocked down the north wall of room 7, they found a cavity between the studs. It was insulated with newspaper from 1954. Inside the wall cavity were 3 more packets of wax paper. The ears were smaller, desiccated. The labels were brittle. These plates didn't return to any known vehicle. They were from the 1940s. The collection was older than the motel. The map on the wall had been a distraction or a fantasy. The horror wasn't geographical, it was stationary. He had been doing this for decades. The 7 in the box were just the ones he hadn't packed yet. Alice Miller was discharged into the care of her sister in 1959. She never spoke of the motel, she never spoke of Cole. She spent the rest of her life in a care facility in Boise. She died in 1994. The site of the Dusty Wheel is now a gravel pull-off for semi-trucks. There is no marker, no memorial, just a wide spot in the road where drivers stop to check their tires and sleep for a few hours before moving on. The ears were held in evidence for 20 years. In 1978, a flood in the basement of the Elko courthouse destroyed the box. The wax paper dissolved. The organic matter decayed. The license plate numbers are all that remain in the file. Clarence Cole was never apprehended. His social security number was never used again. No death certificate was ever filed. He simply ceased to exist in the record, vanishing into the highway system he had memorized on his wall. In 1965, a motel owner in Gallup, New Mexico was found dead of a heart attack. In his office, police found a book press and a stack of wax paper. There were no ears, just the tools. The name on the business license was different. The fingerprints were never checked. The pencil circles on the map in the dusty wheel had included Gallup. It was one of the stops, one of the empty slots waiting to be filled. The case remains open. The 7 identified victims were never found. Their cars were never located. They're simply gone, filed away in a system that no longer exists. Investigators believe the true count exceeds 50. The 41 circles, plus the 7 pins, plus the 3 in the wall. A lifetime of work. A museum of silence scattered across the American West. Alice Miller was the only one who checked out, the only one who walked away. And she left part of herself behind, pressed flat between wax paper, labeled and filed in a cigar box. The identity of the man known as Clarence Cole remains unconfirmed. He was a shadow on the highway, a curator of parts. The map is gone. The motel is gone. But the highway remains. And the patterns of the missing still trace the same lines he drew in pencil on the wall.